McGuire. I'll let Vanessa, who is our moderator, take over. Thanks so much, Vanessa, for being part of this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks to SoundgGirls Female Frequency. And I'm super excited about this. Thank you guys all so much for signing up. Thank you, Danny, for helping putting this all together. And I'm excited a lot about this because Ali was the first person to share information with me about recording remotely through Zoom. So I feel like all of you guys who have come in and signed up for this webinar, we're going to try and share as much information with you guys as possible to help, so you guys can work forward in terms of recording and working remotely from home. So yeah, to further introduce Ali McGuire, she is an amazing, talented producer, vocal producer, mixer engineer, also gold record producer. Briefly tell us a little bit about your background and share with myself and everyone else who's tuned in.
Yeah, so I've been a professional audio engineer, I guess, for about 10 years now. I started my career actually in live sound in Philadelphia, working all over the city. And then eventually to my last tour in 2016, which was with Fetty Wap and Post Malone. And that's when I decided to move out to LA to move in and focus on the recording and mixing side, making records, because that was always the goal. Live sound I feel like it just kind of happened to me, and I'm grateful for it. Taught me a lot of stuff. And then I came out here, and I've worked at pretty much, every label. I got the gold record with an artist named Joji.
Awesome.
I can never ever remember any of my credits when anybody asks me to name them. So
there's this wonderful tool called All Music too. For any of you guys who are listening, you can always look up credits there. But yeah, continue on, please.
But I mean, long story short, I do this. And now that, once the pandemic happened, it was almost like an immediate switch for me of, all right, well, how can I do this from my home? There has to be a way. And I actually work with an online label called Hard Drive. If any of you have ever heard of it, if any of you are artists, I really suggest that you check it out. A lot of great resources. But I started doing online consultations with their artists. Like I offered a free 15 minutes in the beginning of the pandemic, and that's what got me on Zoom. And it was just kind of like, all right, I was trying to teach people how to mix. I was trying to mentor them and stuff. And it turned into just digging deeper into Zoom and how I can do that on a more efficient level, and now I have entire recording sessions from my bedroom to people in London. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And just for you guys who are listening, in terms of if there's anything to kind of promote here is what can we do creatively and in our power to keep things moving and keep things going and think outside of the box. And this is one way, of course, with the sudden obstacles coming in here that we've faced, this is certainly one way to turn things around and try and figure out ways. So we're going to hop around a little bit. We've got a bunch of submitted questions, and then, me and Ali are going to kind of riff on stuff, and I'm going to specifically ask you, Ali, to address some certain things. But let's jump right into this. First off, for those people who are producers, engineers, mixers, or interested in getting into more recording or artists, we're going to kind of talk about all this stuff related to all you guys. So for people who want to record with Zoom, first off, let's kind of get into this. What kind of equipment do you need, like at a minimal, would you say, is required, if you want to start remote recording and do stuff from Zoom?
If you want to be me or the person who's being recorded is a better question there.
Okay, so this is good. We need to cover both these things. So let's talk about you. What do you use? What's the minimal, or what's your setup like on Zoom? Let's start with equipment.
Well, I mean, honestly, for the person who's recording, you know, all you really need is your computer, which is kind of crazy. You know, obviously, if you're going to be recording someone, you probably have, you know, your own DAW because you need to know how to do it. But really all I need on my end is Zoom right now.
Zoom. Okay, cool. And for someone else, like, for example, the artist you're going to record or the songwriter you're going to songwrite with, or if there's two bandmates in a scenario, what do they need, the person on the other end? What kind of hardware is required?
Yeah, like at a minimum, you need a DAW, you need a microphone, you need an interface. And it could be it could be a Focusrite, it could be an Apollo. It doesn't really matter. You just need to be able to get signal into your computer.
Cool. So for those of you guys, just to kind of break this down, you know, in terms of hardware, preamps, an interface could be everything like Ali was mentioning. You know, Focusrite, there's Universal Audio, there's Avid. What are some other ones that we can just kind of quickly mention? There's some very affordable ones out there available right now.
SSL has a new interface, a 2-channel interface. It's that I think is like $250 right now. You know, I'd say the most common for anyone starting is definitely a Scarlett from Focusrite.
Yeah, I think it's like $99 or something.
Yeah, it's not a lot, and their newer ones actually come with something similar to console from UAD, which is cool.
Yeah,
it's called
Universal Audio. Control. Okay, I know Universal Audio just came out with a new one called Solo as well. But
right, yes.
But yeah, okay, so that's great. So you guys who are listening and watching, you know, take note. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is obviously a computer. You need a hardware, preamp, an interface, and then let's talk about.
Hang on a second, sorry.
Who's that?
Oh, that's okay. But
Okay.
Yeah, continue.
Okay, so let's talk about DAWs, software. So for you guys who are, let's say, maybe just getting into this, let's break down a couple DAWs or software programs that people can use to record at home. What is your DAW of choice?
It's Pro Tools. we knew this. But
I did know this.
I have some bias towards some other ones. But honestly, anything there's Pro Tools, there's Logic, there's Ableton, there's Studio One, there's Cubase, there's Reaper. I mean, there's GarageBand. Like, can you get we're just trying to get a signal in here. You know what I mean?
Totally. And that's cool. You know what? It just says that you don't need a lot to get this going. And also on a side note, Ali has this wonderful YouTube series that she put together with her, myself, and a bunch of other amazing producers, engineers, mixers, and they all kind of talk about the different DAWs that they use. So you guys can look that up further if you're interested. Cool. So we've got the hardware, we got the software.
Hold on one second. I do want to interject because I should have said this. And this is actually just something that I really came across yesterday, is that, yes, you need a computer, but we also got to make sure that you have a computer that can handle running a DAW and Zoom at the same time.
Okay, cool. This is really a key element. So what would that mean for people when they're setting this up?
It would definitely mean like having at least 16 gigs of RAM. I think everyone at this point in time should have 16 gigs of RAM anyway, with just OS X and stuff like that. And making sure, like, so if you go on like Zoom or any DAW's website and look up the specs, it's going to tell you what it needs, the kind of processors that it needs to run. So yeah, like after I hadn't even thought about it. And that's the thing. I mean, about audio in general, whether we're talking remote recording or not, like there's always going to be something new that's going to come up and be an issue. And you're like, oh man, can't believe I didn't think of that or this or that. And yesterday was the first time I ran into somebody who, when I was remote controlling their screen, Pro Tools just couldn't run. Because
and that
both
was
of them
all
were
because
working.
of that. Okay, so that's an important, really important thing to bring up. You know, someone also was asking, do you think that have you, like, in terms of recording other people, have you recorded people with multiple different kinds of software? Have you found that there's a particular quality that turns out the best between all of that you recommend or think?
Well, so just for me, like in the beginning of the pandemic, you know, people were coming to me with questions and we were using just their DAWs, and mainly that was Pro Tools and Logic. I think maybe I had one Ableton. I wish I would add more because I know Ableton really well. But for me, what I realized is that if I was going to run a remote recording session, that the other person needed to have Pro Tools because that's what I'm most efficient at. So, you know, like whenever and I still will help people in Logic, but it's always so frustrating for me. I always fumble around it. I can when I tell you that I've just been trying to be just all right at Logic for like 6 years, you know, but I don't know what it is about it. So for me, I just found that it's going to work best if it's in Pro Tools because that's what I'm the most knowledgeable at. So for anybody else, I think it's just about knowing what you're best at.
Yeah, totally. And picking what's the easiest. I also too, I do weekly writing sessions with a band out of Nashville, and they use Studio One. I'd never used Studio One before. And I was like, you know, when you know one, you know, DAW, you kind of know a lot of them, and sometimes you can pick them up pretty quickly. But maybe in this recommendation, if you are recording people, pick the thing that is the one that's the most familiar for you. And if you're just learning stuff, start easy. You got to start somewhere, and it's totally cool to take your time and to try and figure stuff out. Would you suggest, someone was asking about multi-tracking from Zoom. Have you done a session, let's say, for example, where you recorded a drummer and they set up their, you know, drum kit and they've got like, you know, 8 mics on a drum kit? Have you done that and had like a good experience with it? Was it, you know, any particular software that made it easier? You know, doing Pro Tools, of course, knowing Pro Tools, but
so I haven't done multi-tracking at the same time like that. It's been all vocal stuff just because, you know, I'm really in the realm of pop, hip hop and R&B, so that's really just kind of what comes to me. I don't foresee, honestly, that there would be any difference, you know, except for the processing, but the processing should still be low on any of the DAWs and if you're just recording.
Cool. Yeah, myself included. I have only recorded individuals as of yet, or worked one-on-one, let's say, you know, even with just songwriters. I would want to ask also, you know, one of the biggest quarrels I feel like a lot of artists feel, or myself definitely for sure, is how to deal with the delay compensation. Do you have any thought on anything to improve that if one runs into that with doing this?
I mean, so for all the experience that I've had with it, the delay is like 0.5 seconds. And so what I use is a plugin. The plugin is actually named Listen To, but you have to look for Audio Movers. So why they did that. So Audio Movers by Sound Better. But when you look for it in your DAW, it's going to come up as Listen To. So what that plugin does is you would put it on your master out as the last plugin, and it will send, and then you'll type in, and I can show it later too as well.
Wonderful.
And so you just type in, you say start transmission, and then you send a link to the other person, and the actual output from your DAW will come through the internet directly to you, directly to me, if that makes sense. So if I was recording Vanessa, she would have audio movers on her out. She would transmit to me. I would click on the link, and then I would hear it as if it was coming from, as if we were in the same room together, at about a 0.5 second latency. So it hasn't really been an issue for me.
That's awesome to hear. And I feel like a lot of people are going to be stoked to hear that, because that's the one thing I know for, artists even collaborating, it's been super tricky. But to step back to the beginning of this whole Zoom, would you be open to sharing like how exactly you share, do like a screen share and take control of someone's computer to record them? And
yeah.
Just a simple, just a rundown, because basically that is how one is operating Zoom when you record someone remotely.
Yeah, so I mean, basically all it is again, if I was recording Vanessa, she would hit the green share screen button that everyone can see right now, and share. So another thing, not everybody is comfortable with you having control of their entire computer, but that's cool because Zoom offers you to only share a certain window. So you can either share your desktop, or you can just share a window with me. And then at the top, I'm trying to remember exactly what it says right now, but there's a drop-down menu, and you ask for remote access, and then the other person grants it to you, and then you can control their whole screen. Almost all of the keyboard shortcuts work, and it's really incredible. And that's how I've been doing like a lot of my teaching, as well, because then I can just show people what I'm doing instead of being like, hey, no, the button's over to the left a little more. No, more left. No, oh, you went past it. Like
Totally. No, that's and to just kind of go on that, when I'm working with an artist and producing them remotely, I'll see their software, and I'll tell them, how to get the levels right. I'll see what they're talking about. And this is really great for collaborating, even if you're not a mixer or a producer. Just if you're in a band or songwriting with someone, you can say, hey, like, why don't you try this effect? And like, you can see their screen. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. In terms of, I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit more, but in terms of like, have you done any live streams from Zoom and shared it yet?
No, I haven't done any live streams. This has all been like individual one-on-one kind of stuff for me.
I know some people were asking about this, and I'll just kind of talk about this. I think this is maybe more of an advanced thing and kind of in the works, but I know you can share your screen and set up stuff. There's a couple different software programs. There's one particularly, I think it's called OBS, and another one called One Stage, I think. I would have to get back to you guys on that. But I know that when I've done live streams, I usually use my phone and I kind of point it at the screen. But I think as time goes on, I think with all of us being remote right now, mainly, I think they're going to develop more software and more advanced things for us to be doing stuff like that and sharing screens and doing stuff, if you're going through something and want to do something live, to just answer that person's particular question. Okay, so here's a question that I think is great, especially for people who are just getting into this. Do you have any recommendations, and we can both talk about this, but recording and getting good audio settings just for people who are even just beginners, just to start? Let's say, you are producing a singer, and what would you recommend to them in terms of like how to set their volume, something super simple, to give them a place to start?
The most simple thing to say is that you just, first and foremost, the most important thing is your input signal always. So I just want you to get a strong signal that's not distorting. And generally on any meter that you're looking at inside of your DAW, when it's showing you your input, that you're going to want to be like, there's going to be green, yellow, and red, right? So I would just want it to be just over top of that green, maybe, and your peaks kind of going to the middle of the yellow. And that's what I think is the safest and easiest place to start. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely. And we're going to get into this more. We're going to talk about like file sharing and tips like that. But always the whole key to this is, as you guys are learning more about recording, is leaving the space, having a strong signal, but leaving a space for the mixer, even if you are the mixer, or sending it to a mixer, and then the mastering person. Because basically, if you're sending out audio that is in the red, it is basically, there's no headroom to add effects. You figure these things out through working on them. To jump around a little bit more, what do you think, since we've gone more into remote work and during the pandemic, what do you think has been the biggest obstacle for you to get over and to try and work through in terms of recording?
The internet. And I mean, and I mean that more in a way of it's difficult to troubleshoot when you're not in the room. And especially when, you're working with people who don't, who can't speak the same language that you're speaking. How do you get across to them what they need to do to remedy the situation? Which again is why it's really important for you to use a DAW that when people are like saying, hey, there's latency in my headphones, it's late. And, now I got to tell you, where are your buffer settings? I have to get you there. And obviously with me remote recording the screen, that's a little easier, but other people, I was just working with someone the other day, and he was using an Avalon 737. And we were like looking at his level, and I'm like, it's still way too hot. And then I'm like, well, we have to go over all the settings of this Avalon, because I know you're not using it right, but I can't physically touch his Avalon. So I have to direct him on how to use it, how to use the compressor. Are we going to use, the EQ on it? And all that stuff. Luckily for me, UAD has an Avalon plugin. So I actually got to pull that up and share my screen with him, and I could go over all the knobs individually with him that way. But that's definitely the biggest obstacle is how do you change the things that I actually can't physically touch?
Totally. And there's no replacement for the human connection, especially like when you're producing someone. Or to how do you physically, turn something around so you can see it? I think one of the great features, about Zoom is that you can screen share, or you can utilize your phone, or try and explain stuff. But, this kind of comes down to, I think one of the biggest things is, when you're going through a lot of parts and recording a lot with an artist who is maybe not as experienced. And this is kind of addressed to producers and the mixers and engineers here. How do you explain things and keep things super organized, and get a really good flow if you guys are going back and forth a lot? And I think we should definitely get into some tips about this and talk about file sharing and talk about organization. I think this is key, in terms of when you have directions, try and keep the emails in like the same email and go back and forth to try and keep the chain really simple. Try and keep the directions really simple, especially if someone's learning for this. In terms of file sharing, let's talk about this. This is a big deal because especially if you're building a track, you're going back and forth, sending stuff back and forth constantly. What are your biggest tips in terms of sharing files, working with an artist, tips that you can give other mixers and other engineers as well?
Well, the biggest thing is please label your tracks. Please don't send me anything that says audio 1.3.586. I've had some times where people have sent me and that is literally all of the file names.
Oh my gosh.
So, somehow, and then you're like, oh, I accidentally did this to this audio. How do I even find the original one now? Labeling is the most important thing for me. Now I'll speak in, more of a mixer point of view of getting files delivered to me. Vocals, I usually want them, to be dry, sent to me so I can throw them kind of in my template. And I usually want those to be in mono because that's how they were recorded. As far as, instruments, however the producer has sound designed those instruments, that's how I want them. I don't want to ever be trying to recreate a sound because it's almost impossible to like recreate something that you intentionally did. And all of those instruments I generally want to be in stereo because of that sound design. So you could have done anything that makes it stereo, even if...
So even, for the people who aren't, let's say, maybe that familiar, she's referring to like even some panning or volume automation. But yeah, continue on, please.
Sure. And that's great. And with vocals, if you do vocal effects, I want those vocal effects as well, because again, they are intentional and that's how you want them to sound. And those will also come in stereo. And I also just want you to send anything that you think that you need to send, even if it's not in my file. I send a whole sheet of how I'd like things to be. But anything that you think that I should use and telling me why you sent this, and just the more communication is always the better. Always tell me everything. Tell me like what color you feel in this section. You're like, it's yellow. I want it to be yellow. I like
rainbow.
I need to do that. I'm actually about to start work on a 10-song album with this guy, and we're meeting up on Wednesday so he can tell me the story of the whole album before I start mixing it.
That's awesome.
It's gonna be awesome. I'm pumped.
That's super cool. And also here's a couple of things to kind of add to that is one thing that is super important when you are sending tracks, even if you're an artist working with a remote mixer or producer, mastering engineer, whatever it is, make sure when you bounce your tracks is to bounce them from the beginning, or address and communicate where the click starts or where the timing starts. Even if you're not playing to a click, that communication is so key, because with all the file sharing that goes back and forth, if you're building tracks and, recording at different times, if, like Ali was saying, talking about labeling stuff clearly, like clean guitar 1, clean guitar 2, vocal effects 1, be very communicative about it, and bounce it from the top. That way a producer, engineer, mixer can just easily import it in whatever DAW possible. And also this this depends. I think, Ali, you mentioned this, but sometimes for some particular things, I ask for artists to give me stuff at 0 or like take things off, just give me clean stuff. And that's because if I'm mixing something, that way I can add to it. But it all depends on what effects, sometimes for some artists, the effects are already on, like you were saying, and we were talking about, with panning effects, something that's deliberate. But I think the main key is about communication on it.
Sure.
Another thing that came up that I wanted to discuss is, some people don't know in terms of bouncing out files. What do you recommend if you are working with a singer and they are sending you vocal tracks? How should they bounce them out? What should the numbers look like? We're going to get technical for a second.
Sure. 2448, or for me anyway. Is that basically what you're asking me?
Yeah, totally. And some other finer details too, like, what exactly those numbers are, 24 versus 16. I mean, we don't have to get too in depth into it, but 24, she's talking about 24-bit.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm being honest, if you want to just take that and explain it, that might be a little better, because I understand what it means, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to explain it that well in this current moment.
That's okay. Yeah, so when you're doing bounces, you want to, whatever you record it, you want to bounce it out that way if you're sending it to a mixer. Now, if you're doing final mixes, that's a different story. This is like a total side note, but I always request or suggest to artists that, or bands or mixers, that you bounce stuff out for artists for their final songs at 24 and 16, because of the online distribution being different, having different requests. Some of them require 44.1 HZ. We're talking about sample rates and stuff like this. This is something that I highly recommend that you guys look up online. This is something too, if you're a mixer or getting into recording, to get yourself well versed in. There's all kinds of, stuff that we can go into and talk about LUFs, and, some online stores require certain LUFs. These are certain levels. So this is stuff to research and look into, because it's all going to depend on the artist. It's all going to depend on what exactly you're doing. So to start, also Ali has a really awesome file sharing document that she sends out to her artists when she's recording. And this will be passed on later after the Zoom. And I recommend to all other mixers and engineers to have some sort of like requirements, to make it clear for your artists or people who you're working with or collaborating with, to kind of give, some directions ahead of time. Is there, in terms of anything else, in terms of the file sharing or suggestions you might have, in terms of communication?
I will sort of add to, like, me sending out the file sharing document, you should also do that with your policies ahead of time.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I send out a policy that says, you agree to pay me this much to do this. This is how many revisions that I will do before I charge more money, and when I do charge more money, this is how much it's going to be. I will, when the song is finished, I will give you an a cappella, an instrumental, and a performance track. If you would like stems, it's this much per hour. So that way, and then they have to agree to it in an email before I will start the project. So that way there can never be any, and we've all done it. We've all been there, been like, we do the project, and then you're at the end of your revisions and you're like, hey, well, you got to pay me this much more now. And they're like, what? You know, it's like, well, hey, here are my policies. It's like, well, why didn't you just tell them about your policies straight up out the gate?
And
Again,
this is such a great recommendation for any of you guys who are like just getting into this. This is like such a really good thing that Ali is talking about right now. Have you found, like, you know, and I'm going to get into a couple other questions and jump here because this is more related, but have you found did things become easier when you implemented stuff like having a policy for recording remotely or just recording in general with people and giving them directions?
Yeah, for sure. Because like, I don't think that me and Vanessa could stress enough that it is all about communication here. Like at the end of the day, if I send you a mix that is like very far off from what you wanted, it's because you didn't communicate to me what you want. I can make a mix sound any kind of way if you explain to me what you're looking for. As an engineer, probably my least favorite sentence is, just go off, do you, Ali? Go ahead, you know? And like almost always I'm like, all right, cool, yeah, this is gonna be so much fun. And then they're like, well, that's not what I wanted. I was like, well, you didn't tell me what you wanted.
So the key is communication. You have to be
always
full on communication mode.
But that's why, you know, like, so also at the bottom of my file sharing guidelines, it talks about sending me references. Reference tracks are an amazing way to keep us on track with your goals for the song. I like, you know, 2 to 3, and then I want you to send me the references and what you like in that reference in comparison to your song. Because you might send me something where you like the reference, but you really only like the bass in that reference as compared to your song.
Yes, it's trying to be specific as possible.
Exactly. You know, and it's, I've come into contact with artists, and you have to be willing to go there with your client as well, because sometimes they don't know how to tell you, and you have to get them to tell you what they want. I have an artist that I work with, and one mix we were doing, like, there was just like one thing she wanted changed, but she was having a really hard time communicating with me. And eventually she said, you know what, Ali, like, this is good. It's good enough. And I was like, no, it's not good enough. We're going to stay on this. We're going to talk about this until I can do what you want. We're not just going to put out a song that you're not 100% happy with just because we don't, because we're not saying the right words to each other right now.
I think that's super important too, for you guys to kind of take note of, is that, you know, the mixer, engineer, producer, songwriter, doesn't matter. I think the quality and the time you spend and getting it right and making sure that you're happy, the artist is happy, the producer's happy, whoever, it's the quality is there. The heart has to be there. You gotta put the time and effort and care into these things. And this is why this is, you know, one of the hardest jobs to do, be an artist or be an engineer, producer, or mixer. I mean, these are all really hard jobs, and you got to put your heart and time into this and get it right. So if you don't get it right, keep going and keep working at it. I feel like there's nothing to supplement that, for sure. Is there any way that you could be willing to give us kind of like what you think is like a ballpark way to charge, you know, artists for recording time? You know, even if it's just a range we can talk about, you know, just so people have an idea of what they can charge people or what artists should expect from, you know, a remote engineer or producer or mixer. You know, I've done a lot of this stuff even before the pandemic, you know, so I don't know if this stuff has changed for you or fluctuated or stayed the same the whole time. But what do you think in terms of kind of a range?
Well, for me, for right now, I'm charging $50 an hour for it. You know, this all depends on, it all depends on you. And that's the hardest part about this is, especially when you're freelance, you're working in this business, is that you have to determine what your worth is. You have to determine what your time is worth to you, and where you are in your career with it. When I first, started recording, I was only charging, people $10 an hour because I needed to record, more than I needed to get paid for it.
When I was an assistant, I was working 14 hours for like $100 a day or something.
Yeah, no,
we're
right.
all in there working for free too,
And like it's so hard to talk about, because also, like, when there's a project that you really believe in, like, I'm gonna go and get that project, and first of all, always do business up front. Never do business after it's done. It's never ever gonna work out for you. But sometimes it's like, if there's a project that you really want to be a part of, you got to be a part of it. It's like, so the line is always fluctuating. Is this good advice? I don't know.
I think it really is. I mean, I would say, on the scale, I've seen it, the number is about 50 to 100 an hour for most engineers and producers. Right. And it varies from, day rates, depending on if you're just producing or you're just engineering. I've seen stuff ranging from 250 to 500 for an engineer a day. I've seen it, 350 to 500 for a producer and up. It really depends. But I think that, 35 on a lower scale, an hour for an engineer, possibly $50 to $100 in this day and age is completely reasonable for an engineer or producer, especially working remotely. Definitely. This is a tough question to talk about. And you know what? I don't think what I stated is a rule. I think it fluctuates, as you were mentioning. And it's hard for people to talk about. But the thing is, if you don't look at your music, your art, what you do, your craft as a business, how will you make it, grow? And, you're not going to work at a grocery store for free. You're not going to see the doctor, and not pay the doctor. So we all have skills, and it definitely comes down to, what you believe your worth is and all your experience. But for 1,000%, I believe most people get into this for the passion and love of it. And that's what drives a lot of people. But
sure. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
But I will say, one of my mentors said this to me one time, and I think that it's the best rule that you can do this by is never do it for less than you can stomach. And that's just
very good.
You know what I mean? Whatever the project is, if you love it, so you'll do it for less, cool, because you can stomach it. You're like, that's cool. This is going to be fun, and I'm going to make money. Shit. That's great. But if it's like a really tough project with some really tough clients, like that, you're going into, you'd be like, this is my price. And if you can't give this to me, I'll see y'all when you can. Because it's not worth my time.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
And there have been, plenty of times where, you're so, like, obviously we're all here. We want big records. We want plaques. We want that, and sometimes, that leads you into a situation where you're taking less than you can stomach. And you know what? It just like makes you sleep less. So don't, even, again, that's just it. Don't do it for less than you can stomach. There's nothing else to say about it.
Yeah, and it also, I do want to add that you guys doing remote work, when you are producing and doing file sharing back and forth, this is a lot of work. So it's important that you recognize that this is a skill, this is time consuming, it's an art. And also for the artists who are putting in time, it is a lot of work too. The remote stuff is, I feel like it can be a little bit more challenging than in person. You know, we're talking about this stuff. It takes more time for different things. But I think the key is patience and learning and embracing some of these technologies. There is so many things that you can do in terms of being a songwriter and collaborating with different producers and different artists out there. So, you know, we are really lucky because there is a lot of advanced technology. I want to ask you, when you send files or receive files, what do you usually recommend how artists send files? You know, in terms of, there's a lot of companies out there, there's a lot of websites. What do you like?
Well, first of all, whatever company you choose to use, zip your file. Do not send me, sometimes I get a drive link and it's got like 30 files just all by themselves. And I'm like, I'm not sitting here downloading all 30 of these files. Please zip up your files.
Okay, so make sure it's clear, labeled. Also, real quick side note, WAV files versus MP3s. I have received MP3s from artists before, and it's just not recommended. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, it's low quality. It's already compressed. You're going to send me stuff and I'm going to compress the shit out of it. You know what I mean? So let's not, and then it's going to be compressed again and again and again as it goes down the line. So we at least got to start high to get wherever it's going to go, as you're going to like lose quality along the lines of it going to Spotify or any of the streaming services. So personally for me, I like Google Drive is just my favorite.
Yeah, it's really helpful and organized, easy to be organized on there.
Yeah, WeTransfer is cool. I personally don't like to use WeTransfer because it just always seems to take forever to upload, like when I'm personally sending files. I like Dropbox when you're sending a very, very large file, because once you put it into the Dropbox, it will if you close your computer and open it back up, it will continually upload the file. Whereas like if you're using WeTransfer, it will stop your transfer if you close your laptop.
Okay, so that's really actually a very good thing to note, that you know, if you leave your computer alone, if you've got a lot of files, you're downloading, you know, some big sessions, you were recommending that people do a Dropbox because it'll just continue to download, versus WeTransfer. You know, you might lose it if you lose a connection or your computer goes to sleep.
Exactly.
Awesome. And also, just to kind of add on that, for artists and mixers and engineers, I highly recommend that you guys get hard drives and stay super organized.
Yes.
Ali, do you have any favorite hard drives that you could recommend that you currently use? Do you work off your computer and then update, you know, the drives, or vice versa? How do you like to do it?
Well, my computer hard drive is for my applications only. You know, that's where it's running. All my sessions are going to be running off of actual hard drives. And yeah, oops, sorry, I got stuck. And then after that's over, I will back up to my other external hard drive that is already right here. And then a lot of the times I back up to a cloud as well. But something that I will say to you about uploading to a cloud, and this is communication with your clients. I have clients who absolutely 100% do not want me to upload their sessions to a cloud ever, because they're worried about people being able to hack and steal their stuff. Which, you know, and that's just their personal choice. So just make sure you're talking to your clients about
just
what
communicate about that. Yeah,
about what you're doing with their files. But you know, you want to have like 3 backups, as I'm sure has happened to Vanessa and every other engineer who's in here. our hard drives have crashed, or when we were starting, we accidentally updated our OS X before we should have, and then none of our programs worked, or, one time I melodined this entire pop session and I was just about done with it, and this hard drive just straight crashed, like, while I was doing it, which had never happened to me before. And, like, luckily I had that session, like, in a Google Drive link, because otherwise I would have lost it completely, which would have really sucked. It was like 75 vocal tracks in that session.
Yeah, the more work you guys do, the more you should back up and save. I mean, every time I do a mix change, I even save a new session, just because it's easy to backtrack and go back there. Also, what Ali mentioned, I had updated my software to from Mojave to Catalina, and hopefully, if any of you guys are in this situation, do not ever download new software without researching the compatibilities with the software. I basically had to reinstall everything on my computer during the pandemic.
And so this brings us to another point. If you have a Mac and you don't have Time Machine, as soon as this Zoom is over, get a hard drive, partition it, and have Time Machine on your computer, so you can just Time Machine it back.
Yeah, that's a key thing, actually. You can go back and find stuff. I mean, there's so many. I was able to recover things. There's always kind of a way, but save yourself the extra time. I'll tell you what, I spent like 12 hours or something on the phone with Apple, something insane. But you guys, this is another key element of paying a lot of attention to detail with recording. Even if it's simple and you're working remote, there's a lot of fine details to take note of. And, that's half of it, I would say, at least.
Sure. I mean, and I thought a great point that you brought up was about saving sessions. Like,
what do you do?
Yeah, so like when I've done a mix, I send it out and then they hit me back with notes. I'm always going to do a save as. And the best way to do this is just, so when I get a session, I bring the files in, artist name, song name, mix prep. As soon as I start the mix. Once I want to save it and go to, like, keep the changes I had in case I want to go back, mix 2, 3, 4. Don't name it like mix, this is the last one, I promised myself. Stuff like that. Because then if you are sharing these files back and forth, you can always tell who you're working with. It's just easier to tell the order that you're going in, and keep everything organized. As an engineer, I mean, half of our time is probably file management, making sure all your audio files made it into the audio files folder, because still we don't know why Pro Tools doesn't want all your audio files to go in the audio files folder.
Some stuff disappear. Yeah, that's something important to make note of, is when you're importing files, double check to make sure they're in the audio folder. And also on the artist front, if you're sending tracks, let's say to Ali, for example, one thing that would help you is if you label stuff and whatever you're recording, like on playlists, so you can keep track, and then also make it, clear and maybe the same name in a folder when you're bouncing it out also, so it goes together and easy to follow.
Yeah, I mean, that's even like, putting things in folders like drums, vocals, having it even more labeled out like that, so it's always easier to find the files.
Definitely. Okay, so that's, a fine note on detail there. I want to skip around and talk about and address, someone was asking, and I think this is an artist, was asking how you would set up and route effects, returns, and sends with internal plugins and external plugins. They were specifically asking about Logic, but maybe we can kind of discuss this about, covering all DAWs, a simple way. Let's say someone at home wants to add an effect on their vocal, or they've got a pedal and they want to set that up with your vocal. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so man, well, it all sort of depends, doesn't it? I guess on what we're doing.
Whatever way it's like, yeah, exactly. There's a million ways to do it. It's just which route you want to go.
Listen, that's like the hardest part about teaching anybody anything about this, because like, yeah, I'm going to teach you this, but like maybe you would do it completely differently. So
well, how about this? What would you do? How would you set up, if you were setting up and routing, on it?
No, I got you. So first of all, everybody, I really suggest that you have templates that you start
this
with.
Is a really good point. Yeah, definitely.
Just so it takes time, and even myself, every day when I'm in a mix, I'm like, Allie, you're doing this every day. Like, could you please just make a track preset so you can save yourself some time? So that way it's like, I want this effect, I know where it is, I could put it up right away. So
she's talking about saving a setting. When you find a setting you really like and you use it a lot.
But like how I have, like, let's just talk about my reverbs and delays. I think that's the easiest way to talk about this right now, like for my vocals. So bus 1, 2 is my room reverb, my main reverb. 3, 4 is an 1/8 note delay. 5, 6 is a 1/4 note delay, and 7, 8 is an ambient reverb. And that's just how I have it set up. For vocals and stuff like that, I definitely suggest having sends to your effects like that, to keep them separate, so you can actually EQ your reverb and delay. So what a send is, it means like, so here's my vocal track with all my processing on it, and then from this track it's going to get sent out to another track where the reverb is, and now this signal is running through that reverb.
Now, is it a aux track or is it a regular track for those people who don't maybe know the difference?
Yes, a bus is an aux send. So you're not actually gonna see like an audio file of this reverb, but if you want to think about it in this way, is that it is just the track of reverb. So you're not actually going to see it, but in your head you can visualize that you'd be mixing that reverb in with your dry audio track.
It's a very good way of explaining it. And this gives you guys more control versus putting it directly on the track.
Now, I will say that, sometimes when I just need just a little bit more of that reverb, I'll throw, this is a trick that one of my mentors showed me, especially for R&B vocals. He likes to put R-verb actually on the track and mix it probably between like 4% and 16%, depending, just to get more of that extra vibe. So, and even if you go on my my YouTube, I talk about effect sends and stuff like that, and that I want you to have buses set up. But just because I tell you that, or anybody tells you that, if you want to slap some reverb directly on that channel, you go for it.
Totally. There's a million different ways and there is no rules.
But I will say the reason why you don't want to always just be putting your reverb and stuff on your track is because now that reverb, whatever you do to it, if you put an EQ that's actually on the reverb and you change it, that's changing the tone of your actual vocal now instead of just the reverb.
Cool. And can people apply this the same way they do in, like, let's say Logic as Pro Tools? Does it all work the same?
Sure does.
So it's nice and streamlined. So to set up these effects, if you will, like Ali's talking about reverbs, whatever DAW you're in, it applies basically the same.
Yes.
And if someone wanted to, let's say you're recording an artist and you wanted a clean track of the vocal, but also wanted another track of the vocal with their, let's say, effects pedal. How might you give them directions to set up the pedal so you could get that effects? So we're not talking about plugins. We're talking about like actual, like a guitar pedal, let's say, that's like a vocal effect.
Sure. I mean, it's realistically the same way, except that it's real and not virtual. So you're gonna set you can use sends to send it out, or you can actually send the actual output of the track out of your interface into that pedal, out of the pedal back into your interface, and record it in.
Cool.
Did I do that right?
Yeah. And I think for you guys, you know, just in case you want to experiment and try stuff out at home, you know, this is definitely the time to like, you know, try stuff. This is how you're going to figure out how to get different sounds. You know, whether you're using a pedal, you know, as an effects, or even plugged into your guitar, or you're going direct and adding plugins. I think there's, you know, as we were talking, there's a million different ways, no right or wrong way to do it, just a lot of different varieties, and whatever scenario you're in, it will call on whatever thing that connects with the project. In terms of, I guess, any other obstacles or hard things that you came across that you found a way around, you know, in terms of remote recording, anything that you saw that was really challenging, but you overcame it?
Yeah, I mean, I really think we touched on most of it, to be honest with you. Like, so much of it was me figuring out, like, so besides that, there's audio movers. Like, you can actually use Zoom's audio device to share the audio from your computer.
Okay, this is really cool. Let's talk about this some more.
Yeah, but now, like with Logic and with Ableton, they have separate input and output devices that you can use. Pro Tools, on the other hand, you can only choose one interface, and if you want to have two, you have to create an aggregate device. In audio MIDI setup, which this is a lot, and I'm very grateful for being able to remote control people's screens to get this done. But so you have to choose different outputs for your Zoom audio device through that. I mean, I could share my screen and show if you want.
You know what? I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, because I'm not going to be able to explain this with just my words.
I think this is really cool. And this, you know, for you guys who are watching, this is going to be just kind of a whole nother insightful world opening up.
And like, if I'm being, hold on, I gotta X out of it. I got a lot of things going on in my computer. I don't need to save that, delete it.
The wonderful thing too about this remote recording, and there's so many different ways of doing stuff. And I think it's again, to emphasize, the key with technology is embracing it and trying things, because it's a lot of about creativity and how we can make things work.
Exactly, you know, because, right. So why I ended up getting it and figuring out the aggregate device and all of that stuff. And honestly, like before all of this, I never had to create one ever before. So, you know, and I've been doing this for a while, and like I don't even know that I was saying aggregate correctly, because I was like, why does Pro Tools always choose this thing that I never need? And now I do. But so, okay, so let me share my screen. All right. So get out of my way, Zoom.
So we're looking at console for you guys who haven't seen it before, by Universal Audio. I think they developed it, yeah.
So I just want you guys to understand that before the pandemic, all I had was my Universal Audio Thunderbolt and my computers in and out. And now I have all of these fun devices from all the ways I was trying to figure out how I could remotely do things. So I'm really glad that I can share this with you guys. And it seems like it's not like all these steps, because I spent hours and hours agonizing over all of this stuff. So yeah, so you can see here's my Pro Tools aggregate IO. It's the device. And you just choose it, and it has 2 ins and 2 outs. And then my universal Thunderbolt, which is going to be my input, and the Zoom audio device, which is my output. And it tells me up here, like this color is the Zoom audio device. So for my output channels, when I go into Pro Tools, it's channel 13 and 14 for my output.
And how do you get to this window in console if people are operating?
Sure. So this is your audio MIDI setup. Everybody has this on their Mac, at least. If any of you have Windows, I'm sorry, I cannot help you.
And where can you find this window?
Well, it's just I just go into search and I type in audio MIDI setup. It's just a little keyboard, yeah. Yeah, and that's how you set up your aggregate device. You could set up more than one of them if you wanted. I mean, I can probably, let's open up a session.
And so this basically will record to Zoom.
Yeah, so what's going to happen right now is I'm going to bring up a session. I'm going to bring my aggregate device. I actually have to unshare my screen because I didn't share computer audio. So let me do that real quick. So to do this, what you do is you press share screen, and then over in the left-hand corner, it says share computer sound in a button. You have to click that, and then you share your screen. So let's see, let's go into a session that I know I am allowed to play for you guys. Where is this? Yeah, this one. So now that I did that, everybody on this Zoom is going to be able to hear the audio coming out of my Pro Tools.
Awesome.
I mean, we hope anyway, we'll see. But
it's pretty amazing.
It's crazy. You know, one of the things, like getting this set up with other clients and stuff is probably actually one of the most frustrating things, because the way Zoom does it is like to set up the Zoom audio device, like sometimes it shows up when you click it, sometimes it doesn't. You got to restart. You don't have to restart. And it's hard for me to walk people through that, because when they share their screen with you through Zoom, you can't see any of the Zoom settings.
Yeah, so that's tricky. Okay, so maybe one workaround would be doing like a simultaneously like FaceTime, something like that.
Well, no, that is like, right, kind of like that. But so the thing with Zoom too, and not that it's like a super big deal, but for Zoom to be free, like if I'm recording Vanessa and it's just me and her, we could talk forever. We could talk for like 10 hours. Zoom would never shut it off. But as soon as you introduce a third device, even if it's your own cell phone, it only gives you 40 free minutes.
So yeah, that's a workaround there.
Okay, so let's see. We'll see if it plays.
Since we were young kids,
So can you hear
I
it?
never forgot your smile. You were the only one I ever wanted. In 100,000 square miles, appreciate your vibe.
But yeah, so all of you guys could straight up hear my Pro Tools session right now and the actual mix.
Cool, and then this is something that you can record on Zoom, basically.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. So hopefully, you know, with seeing this, you guys, you can see how there's a lot of options and things to kind of investigate further with Zoom and like recording.
And so,
yeah,
sorry.
no.
I just want to say too, like for mix engineers and stuff, this is a great way to do mix notes with your clients.
Yeah, to play it, and if they have some notes, you can kind of go through it and make adjustments as needed.
Exactly. They can see the whole session. They can see everything you're doing. So yeah. And I do want to say about sending files, because this guy Siege, he's one of my favorite clients, because this is how he sends me stuff. So he usually starts with the 808, which is why it says 01 808 here. But then he says 02 kick, 03 snare, 04 clap, 05 hi-hats. So when I bring everything in, it starts with his 808 on top, then it goes through all of his drums to his synths, guitars, and it's like already organized for me.
Super orderly.
Yeah, which is amazing, because even if you, now I'm appreciative if you label things kick and snare, it's easy for me to find, but then I still got to move it to all the places that I want it to be. But now they're all grouped together already. It's just
very helpful. And also you guys can see too how these tracks were bounced out. They're very clear, easy. They're from the top of the session to the end. And you can clearly see how easy it is to, you know, import them in, drag and drop, you know, all of that. Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
To kind of bounce us to another question that was asked, is there any apps that you suggest, or like other additional remote recording tools that you like or have used?
The only other thing is really audio movers. Honestly, it's really just like, I just do all of this over Zoom.
Easy. Also, if you guys are interested, GarageBand does have an app and you can get it for your phone. There's also some different MIDI devices out there. But as far as our questions that were submitted, Danny, are there any additional questions that we should address?
I don't have any coming through the chat at the moment, so
okay.
What's wrong with that?
Awesome. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this amazing Zoom with Ali and myself. Hopefully you guys got some information that you can take away and help with your own projects, whether you're a mixer, engineer, producer, or an artist and collaborating. There's plenty to do for all of us. And thank you so much again to Carrie Keys and SoundgGirls and Danny from Female Frequency. Yeah, any last comments or thoughts? Danny, Carrie, Ali?
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. I believe that there's going to be an email sent out with our email addresses, our Instagrams, any of the pages and stuff we have hooked up where we share any information. And I can only speak for myself here, but please reach out to me. Don't feel like you can't. Don't be scared about it. I'm happy to be a resource. You know, one of my favorite things about being able to remote record is that not only can I record people, but I can teach them while I'm recording them.
Yeah, it's such a cool thing.
It really is, and I've had a great time, you know, helping people learn how to record themselves at home, you know, over this time, or just be better engineers or whatever. The number one, the way that you get better at this is to talk to people who are better at it than you are, so they can share their insight with you, and I'm happy to share everything I've ever learned with literally everybody in this chat if you want me to.
Yeah, and let me just add, you know, it was really awesome, Ali, as I mentioned at the top of this webinar, that Ali was the first person who kind of opened the door for recording remotely and made it apparent that it was able to be done. I didn't know that. And so it was really cool. Thank you for sharing this valuable information. And also, I do live streams every Friday on artist development, recording, and music topics. So you guys can always tune in, Vanessa Silberman Official. And also, you can certainly message me as well, as I will try and cover different topics that people are interested, want to know more about, more in depth. I see also people have commented some stuff in the chat. Thank you so much. I hope this has been really helpful for you guys. Thanks also for putting the link to the SoundgGirls sample rate and bit depth information. That's just really valuable. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Danny, any other thoughts?
No other ones on my end. Thank you everybody for being part of it. Thank you, Vanessa, for moderating, and Ali for all your information on this, and to both of you for really helping out with it. Feel free to follow SoundgGirls at soundgirls.org and femalefrequency.com. We'll have some more Zoom webinars coming up, and yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you guys. Take care. Stay safe.
Peace. Do we leave? Like.